It kind of makes sense. Like the history they have, the resources they already have, the potential to blow Western United and MacArthur's combined fan base out of the water on their, first season. It could be a really interesting move for Australian football. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest clubs in Australian football history. I guess you could say one of the biggest clubs in Oceania. They have won 4 Australian national titles, and yet for the last 17 years, they've not been in the top flight of Australian football. Yes, of course, you know already. We're talking about South
Heidelberg United. Sorry. I always get Heidelberg and South Melbourne confused. Aren't they the same thing? Anyway.
Both Greek.
Hopefully we don't lose any subscribers.
We're talking about South Melbourne Football Club today. And it's in this ongoing series. We keep jumping back to it. Given the merit behind some expansion bid teams. So this one's a bit interesting. We're talking about South Melbourne, who have put in bids in the past to be part of the Australian, top division, the A-League. Probably won't in the next round, but we're going to discuss maybe should they, if they were offered the chance to be in the A-League in the next expansion bid, would they take it? And should they be there? Should they be in that top tier of Australian football? I think most of their fans would say they would. And so let's get into it. G'day, it's Sogg and Brad, and we're here for another episode of Your Couch Critics. Of course, we want you to be involved, so do get down in the comments after watching this video and let us know your thoughts. Do you think South Melbourne should be in the A-League? Please do leave a like. We're going to aim for let's aim for 30 likes on this video. If you're new, click that subscribe button. Plenty of this content coming out every week for you to watch. All right, Bradley, South Melbourne, next expansion rolls around. Do they go for it?
Do they go for it?
Yeah.
Oh, they'd probably go for it, yeah.
Even though we know this national second division is floating around and they're one of the teams really driving that conversation about having a better standard of football underneath the A-League. If the APL came to them and said, look, we know you're thinking about second division, but here's an A-League spot, do you think that's something they would be into? And should they go for it?
I think if South Melbourne, you go for it. I think, yeah, I mean, if they're not going to expand in the next 4 or 5 years, and the only way to get into the A-League, any kind of expansion, will have to go through the national second division. I think sure they'll go through that. But if they can bypass the national second division and get into the A-League, why wouldn't you? I mean, they've been trying. I think they originally tried to join the A-League when it started. They missed out on the last round to Western United. They definitely want to be a part of our national setup one way or another.
Now, in this series, I guess we talked through some of the merits behind said expansion team joining the A-League. So we've done it in the past for Tasmania and New Zealand and Wollongong and Gold Coast. I think they're the 4 teams we've kind of touched on, and Canberra, of course. South Melbourne are kind of in an interesting spot because they're a club that's been around for a while. So they were founded 63 years ago, in 1959. So they're a club with quite a bit of history. Obviously, huge ties to the really big Greek community in Melbourne. They play out of Lakeside Stadium, which holds about 12,000 people, 7,000 seats. Has a big athletics track around it, but it's got 2 kind of stands, one on each side of the pitch, and nothing on the ends. So I guess they've got a fan base and they've got a stadium. Do you see any problems with those kind of? They're 2 big key things, I guess, for expansion size. What do you make of those resources they've got at their disposal?
I think it's pretty good compared to some other clubs in the A-League. I mean, to have the stadium, not a fantastic stadium, but to have a stadium that they're the main tenants at, to have a long dedicated supporter base for, would you say, 60 odd years, that's a lot better than any of the A-League clubs when they formed. They didn't have the fan bases, they had to build them themselves. They would have had to secure stadiums to play in. This club, would have the stadium ready to go. I mean, we look at some teams that have joined the A-League. Well, really only Western United, who hasn't really had that permanent stadium set.
Yeah.
They have it. The ethnic ties, the Greek community, I don't think that's anything that would hold them back. I think we're well past the Anglicizing of the game. We've reneged on the rule to not have like Italian flags on jerseys, to have ethnic ties and names. We're allowing that to happen again. So I don't think it'll matter whether they're called Hellas or South Melbourne. So yeah, I think they'd be pretty well set up if expansion was to come knocking. Obviously, before they missed out to Western United and Macarthur, and we all know those were the Foxtel clubs. Those were the clubs our former broadcaster was saying, we want a new team in Sydney and a new team in Melbourne. Why they chose Western United over a potentially... Oh, we're not going to talk about why they chose Western United, but yeah, they missed out most recently. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, I don't think they're just got Greek fans. I think that's maybe a bit of a stereotype that's just been labelled. They are South Melbourne, Hellas. I think it would be good for them to not get rid of the Hellas, not get rid of the Greek connections. I think that's fantastic and really good, and glad that the A-League is back to allowing those kind of things. But because they're more than just a Greek club nowadays, I think it would actually be good for the area that they're in, for Melbourne to have just be called South Melbourne Football Club, to allow that inclusivity, because that's what we're really for. And I mean, if you talk to a lot of those NPL clubs who were back in the old NSL, I think they would say they never wanted to be exclusive, but there was a commonality. It's where people felt safe when they migrated to Australia. But it wasn't you can't join us if you're not one of us. But there was well, this is us though, and this is our culture, and this is what we want to stand for. So getting that balance right would be good. Now, one thing we have talked about, I guess it came up in the discussion with Wollongong Wolves, less so with some of the other clubs that maybe were advocating a proper expansion side out of nothing, a franchise. South Melbourne have history. Their recent competitive history, do you think it's good enough? I've got the stats here. So let's go back the last couple of years. Obviously, last year they were in 8th place when the competition was stopped. So that's hard to really judge them on. But the season before 2018, they finished 8th in 2019. 2020, there was no positions awarded. 10th in 2018. They came 2nd and made the semi-final in 2017. 3rd in 2016. 1st and 1st in 14 and 15. So maybe 5-6 years ago, they actually were up the top. It's really been the last 3 years that they've maybe dropped off. Not sure what's really going on there, but yeah, do you think this should come into the debate when we talk about existing teams trying to make it into the A-League as expansion sides? Should their recent competitive history be part of that discussion?
Well, how far back are we going competitively? Are we going back 40 years, when they won 4 NSL titles?
I don't think that really matters for the now. It's good history, and that's something they have over a new franchise. Sure, they have history, so there's a connection. But in terms of competition, that means diddly squat, because as we see, they finished 8th 2 seasons ago, 10th the year before. It's about what they're doing now, because we want teams to come in and be competitive. Franchises, I guess, get the opportunity to build a whole new squad. They would have the temptation to keep some of the players that are currently representing them.
Yeah, I don't think competitives would go too much into it. I mean, you're making that full-time, you're making the jump from professional part-time, whatever they are, part-time to complete full-time. A lot of those players are not going to cut it at that A-League level. There's going to be a whole lot of new players that'll come into that squad, regardless of whether they want to keep those previous players. I mean, they're just, if they want to be competitive, a lot of them won't be around. So I don't think, and with expansion, we've never had an existing club come into the league before. I mean, outside the start of the comp with the likes of Perth Glory and Adelaide and Newcastle. So it's hard to gauge, but I don't think that should be consideration.
And I think too, with the A-League, there is no relegation. So even if they kept their entire NPL squad, they can't be punished really for it. So I guess it doesn't really matter. I think some other things, would they have the financial backing? Can they sustain themselves? Obviously, it's much more attractive to get sponsors when you're in the national competition, isn't it? When you're just playing even the top level of Victorian football, sure there's a lot of money going in, but the A-League is a whole new ball game. Are you confident they're a club that could secure that kind of financial backing?
I think so. Yeah. I think with the history and everything they have, I think quite a big fan base. I mean, when you consider the rest of the NPL Victorian clubs or Western United or Melbourne City, they have quite a big fan base. And, for their size, they've got quite a big fan base. And with that brings in sponsors. They think, oh, well, here's a club that's playing at the second tier of Victorian football that's so well supported. Imagine how that'll change when they go to the top level, how much more exposure for sponsors. I don't think there'll be too much issues. I don't think they're going to be like a big, rich club. They're not going to be the likes of like Chelsea or Man City or Melbourne City. I guess that's our best equivalent here. But I think they're going to be probably well-backed. Someone like a Adelaide or Perth Glory, well-backed. Not rich, not poor. I think they'd be solid. But I think it's important that I don't know what their setup is, whether they're owned. They're probably community owned. I mean, if they're going to go to the next level, I think it's important that they find an owner.
Yeah, absolutely.
At a football level, community clubs aren't that common. Obviously, we see that with some clubs that have gone bust and reformed, or clubs like Portsmouth who almost went bust, becoming community owned. But I think that's the direction they'd want to move if they joined the A-League or even a national second division. I think securing finances and having a quite a rich owner, I think, will help.
Yeah. The last maybe big kind of positive, I don't know how much this still stands, but they did big up the fact that Roberto Carlos promised to be their manager if they got the last expansion spot. Do you think that deal still stands if they...
No, I don't think so.
No Roberto Carlos coming down? I
mean, if we got Roberto Carlos, if he was willing to go around again, great. But no, I don't think that deal still stands.
Yeah. Okay.
But you look at who they've had in the past. I mean, the fact that they got Roberto Carlos that was willing to come in. They had Fenner Puskas in the 80s, coached them to a national title, arguably one of the greatest footballers of all time. They had the appeal 40 years ago. They're going to have the appeal again. Getting a high-profile coach from somewhere in Europe, I don't think will be an issue for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They got the draw card, and particularly, say, some big, high-up kind of Greek managers. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Now, do you think there's any negatives to South Melbourne potentially getting an A-League spot before this second division kicks off?
Just their fan base.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. No, well, I just think of one or two individuals on Twitter. Negatives. I mean, you could still look at their stadium as a negative. I mean, it's not a proper football stadium. It has an athletics field around it. And I think if they're going to go to the national stage and play in the A-League for an indefinite amount of time, that stadium needs to be upgraded to be a proper football stadium. Get rid of the athletics field, bring the grandstands closer. I don't think that's a negative stopping them.
Out of Amy Park.
Pardon?
Don't think a fourth team could play out of Amy Park.
I think there'd be riots if South Melbourne even entertained the idea of it. No, I think their stadium's fine. Negatives. I've got to think of a negative, surely.
Well, I think
we've got three Melbourne teams. I think that's probably in a closed shop. I think that's probably a good argument to say no more Melbourne teams because we've got three already.
Yeah,
when
but
when there's
Melbourne, a huge amount of the population of Australia. I'm not particularly sold on this. It should represent all of Australia, because if all of Australia lives in two cities, then that's representative. I think there's enough people in Melbourne to sustain 4 football clubs. Like,
I just think if we're talking about expanding the game, and not if we're not thinking of promotion and relegation, I think we need to expand outside where we've already been to places like Canberra, Gold Coast, Tasmania, and places like that. And a national second division, I don't care if half the comp Sydney and Melbourne. That's how it's going to be if that's how promotion and relegation and all that works out. That's probably the only downside, I think, in an expansion process. You probably don't want to expand a fourth Melbourne team ahead of other options like Canberra, maybe longer down the track. But I guess it depends how it's going to unfold in the next couple of years. I mean, the National Second Division is basically committed to starting till in 2023. So, I mean, if that happens, any aspirations for South Melbourne to join the A-League will probably be over, because I'll join that.
Yeah,
and I'll be looking to get promoted through that into the A-League, and however long that is.
10 years. Yeah. They're predicting that from their report the other week. They're kind of saying it needs a maturity phase, a growth phase, and then a realization phase, which is where they'd like to see promotion relegation with the A-League introduced. And that's kind of 10 years off, they think. If this second division starts, doing promotion relegation down below with the MPLs, but not with the A-League until later. And so yeah, if they join this second division, that's 10 years until they join. So I think you're right. If the position was offered to them, I think they bite the hand off to take that opportunity. It's quite an interesting one, because like I said, it's hard to really find a real negative, other than sure, it's a saturated market, but that's and it's interesting because people have really strong opinions on this. We might get slammed if you're really against this. Let us know in the comments, because I think and this is what South Melbourne say, it kind of makes sense. Like, the history they have, the resources they already have, the potential to blow Western United and MacArthur's combined fan base out of the water on their first season. It could be a really interesting move for Australian football. So will it happen, I think, is a totally different question. I think they're kind of resigned to join the second division. But if it was, I don't know, it would be interesting to watch Australian football react to that situation. So yeah, let us know down in the comments, what do you think? South Melbourne, are you totally against it? Do you think there's actually merit to them being in the A-League? Is that the direction the APL would be smart to go down? Yeah, I'd be interested to see the conversation. Like we said at the start, we're aiming for 30 likes on this video, so please do like it. Share it around. If you're a part of a Facebook football group, or you've just got some mates with a group chat, Reddit, Twitter, share this video around. I think this will be quite a tasty, kind of interesting one for people to get about. So do leave a like, subscribe if you've enjoyed our conversation. Check out some of our other videos, particularly talking about expansion and the National Second Division. We'll probably be talking about that a little bit more in the coming months, I think, as more gets announced. So for now, we've been your A-League Couch Critics, and we'll catch you next time.